Think of a time when you experienced a conversation that left you with a new perspective, or perhaps an inquiry, or you might have felt that something has shifted in you after that conversation. Maybe it helped you gain a new level of clarity, or moved you to take action. That was a coaching conversation. Hello and welcome to the Coaching Conversation. This is your host, Salah Alethi. I am delighted to have with me today Luke Hohmann. I think I came across Luke's work several years ago. He's most famous for his book, Innovation Games, and the work that he does with startups. And, I was preparing for this and I read one of your bios and you have a very inspiring journey. Welcome, Luke.
Oh, thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
You authored 3 books and you had started several companies, and most known for Innovation Games or the Innovation Games Company, and then Continue, which is something that has been around for a while. So can you say a little bit more about your journey? How did you get where you are today?
Yeah, well, of course, that's a longer story, but I'll try and pick off the highlights that I think might be relevant, especially to the coaching and the Agile community. I helped form the first Agile conference way back in 2003, and part of that was an outgrowth of some of the work that had been done at UPSLA. So, for example, Scrum was introduced in the UPSLA conference, and I had introduced my first book in Austin in UPSLA 96, Journey of the Software Professional, and that's more of a deeper book. It talks about the underlying cognitive and organizational structures that kind of are the underlying substrate of the lowest level you can get to with Agile or other practices. Mm-hmm. From the Agile conference in 2003, I had just published my second book, Beyond Software Architecture, and that was in Martin Fowler's series. And then I had been doing Innovation Games in consulting work, and I actually introduced Innovation Games at the 2003 Agile conference, and that was before the book. And I was kind of testing the water, right? Doing hypothesis testing of, if would anyone come to my session and how would it be received? And it was received very well, and my clients were loving Innovation Games, and so that wrote the book Innovation Games. Then I wrote the book Innovation Games, and I was consulting. And then I decided that I really wanted to build software. So I'm kind of a funny Agilist in the sense that I like to be a practicing Agilist. And I know that some people do a lot of work as a practitioner and then they just want to consult. And I always feel, for me personally, that I don't mind coaching and consulting, but I want to be in the game. I still want to I don't want to be on the sideline. I want to be in the game. So I started Contenio, and that put it was Innovation Games as first. I mean, you have the sequence correct. It was first Innovation Games, became Contenio. That company grew. I became associated with Dean Leffingwell and was working with Dean and Scaled Agile as a contractor, actually behind the scenes. So I had worked with Dean for many, many months, and that work materialized in SAFe 4.6 with improvements, including participatory budgeting and lean portfolio management. And it just made sense where Dean acquired Contenio. Our platform that we had created, the Weave platform, has been substantially improved and extended by Scaled Agile. It's now called SAFe Collaborate. It's doing better than ever. And it's really kind of gratifying to watch what happens when you've taken something to a certain place and then other people continue to build on it and make it even better. SAFe 5.0 just came out. Participatory budgeting is even more prominent in SAFe. SAFe Collaborate is doing more interesting things. And so it's kind of just really fun. And then for me, the journey continues. It made sense for me to leave Scaled Agile and start First Root, which is bringing participatory budgeting into schools so that kids can learn financial literacy, civics, and design thinking through a process that is empowering them and enabling them to make decisions. So that's a little bit of my history. And then maybe a couple of things that I'll throw in there that are important. I've served on the board of the Agile Alliance, and I used to run the world's largest webinar on collaboration and partnership with the Scrum Alliance. And I've also done participatory budgeting in the public sector through a nonprofit I co-founded called Every Voice Engaged Foundation. collaboration. So we've done participatory budgeting in big companies, in cities, in schools, and there's lots of places that you can use it.
There's a lot of places we can go from here. I remember hearing your keynote back in, I think, 2015 at the Agile Alliance conference, and you had this really cool title called Super Awesome Problems. And as I think about this, you're talking about how people can solve problems together, which can create a lot of complexity. And so we can start with that. Like when you talked about the super awesome problems, what makes a problem a super awesome problem?
So let's start with the word awesome. So to me, if you go to the dictionary, awesome has various definitions, but one definition is awesome as in inspiring. Like I would say it's an awesome mountain to climb. That can also mean it's inspiring to climb it. It's awesome. It's reverence, if you will. Then you ask yourself, well, what kind of problem am I facing? Am I facing a problem that I can solve on my own? Like as we are talking right now, it's getting close to lunch. And I was thinking, I'm getting hungry. It's kind of getting, well, that's a problem and I can solve it. I just, I'll go make myself a sandwich and I'll eat my lunch, right? So that's not an awesome problem. Right? Because I can just go solve it and it's not very inspiring. I mean, you're eating lunch, right? The problems that we're talking about are the problems that are really big and they're inspiring, but you can't solve them on your own. The problems that I'm most interested in are the problems that you can only solve through collaboration, because that's one of the values of the Agile Manifesto, right? We favor customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And for me, I just shorten that part of the manifesto to say collaboration, meaning I'm collaborating internally with my Scrum teams, my Agile teams. I'm collaborating externally with my partners and suppliers. I'm collaborating with my customers. And so when I think of that, I think of just the notion of, well, what kind of problems are the most inspiring, most awesome problems to solve? They're the problems that require collaboration.
And I think you did something on collaboration at scale. A lot of times people think that solving these problems require some sort of practices or tools or techniques. But at the heart of that, as you mentioned, is this idea of collaboration, which also is one of the biggest values in the Agile Manifesto. And so how does games, because I think that's one of the things that you're well known for, is the innovation games and bringing play and games into Agile practices and beyond. How does game play into that idea of collaboration at scale?
Fundamentally, right? When you think about collaboration, what we start to realize, and I think, there are so many wonderful things that the Agile movement, in a sense, brought together and crystallized very cleanly for everyone. And one of them is Agile is based on teams. And it doesn't matter to me if you're using SAFe or DAT or LESS or Scrum or Kanban. Agile is based on teams. Now, I am partial to the SAFe construction of a team because it's a very inclusive definition of a team. Sometimes definitions of teams can feel less inclusive. SAFe has a very inclusive definition of a team. But nonetheless, we as Agilists work in teams. Now, then if I'm working as a team, how do we work together? Well, to work it together as a team, I need some mechanism of understanding an interaction model. Well, games give us an interaction model called rules. I need to know how I'm doing. Well, that's progress towards a goal. Games give us a visible indicator of a score. I need a field of play that's appropriate for the game I'm playing. If I'm playing soccer or football in the rest of the world, I need, a pitch of about 100 meters, right? And it needs to have certain lines. A game has certain rules or interactions. It has a certain score. And what's really exciting about bringing a proper game theory into our work is that games are voluntary, right? I mean, I'm not forced to play Scrabble at night with my family. We choose to play Scrabble or other games, right? And so the one thing that's really wonderful about what's happening in the Agile community is we're creating these new forms of organizations. Some people know holacracy, sociocracy, teal organizations. As we move towards these structures, we're realizing that this notion of having a voluntary choice and in creating an environment where I want to play that game is really cool. And I can't say how well I've done on this because I'm not perfect, but I have, as a CEO, I always try to create an environment where you want to come to work. You want to play this game.
Yeah.
I think that's important.
This is a good segue because when I was reading about some of the things that you've done, I saw that you also studied cognitive psychology and organizational behavior, and one of the things that I try to help is how to make the game better and help people opt in playing the game. So, let's start first by unpacking what makes a good game. Like, how do you design a game for people to want to play?
Yeah, that's a compelling question because, one of the things that people ask me every now and then, and it's very rare, I teach a game design master class.
Mm-hmm.
So
you have attended one of those classes with you a while back.
So if there are people listening, you can talk me into it, but I teach kind of a semi-private master class on game design and for coaches and other things. But, one of the questions that I'm asked in that master class is, well, how do we make it enjoyable? And the answer is you can't. Meaning a game is a set of rules. The relationship that you personally have to that game determines if you enjoy it or not. I'll give you a really concrete example. Give me a game that you like. Just tell me one game that you've played that you like.
I used to like chess, and I recently got back into playing chess.
Okay. I am not a fan of chess. I understand it. I mean, the Queen's Gambit was this,
that's
super cool, right? But to me, chess takes more cognitive load than I want to give. I am a fan of Scrabble because I like the structure. I'm not a fan of poker. I have friends who love poker. They love the strategy. I was like, it's okay. It's poker, right? But the point is, each of those games have a kind of a contained set of rules, and each of us as individuals kind of decide, well, do I like that game? Do I find it enjoyable? Some people like Settlers of Catan. It's very, very popular. I like Settlers. I'm not like, oh, I got to play Settlers, but I like it. I find it enjoyable. And I think the reason we can make those decisions is because we have governance and we have clarity about the rules and we have clarity about the processes. I actually apply that governance model to my companies. And so at Contenio, our technology stack was Scala. That was our back-end system. We were very proud. We were the first production system written in Scala. We helped fund the Lift framework. We used Angular as our user interface. Now, I'm not saying that these are provably the universal choice for every solution. I am saying that in our environment, we were super clear. In the game that we're playing at Contenio, the rules of the game are we are playing Scala. If you don't want to use Scala, don't apply to work here because you're not going to come in here and change the rules of the game because we've already had too many people agree to play this game. It'd be kind of like going into a soccer game and saying, hey, everyone, I want to change the rules. I want to have anyone touch the ball with their hands. And all of the other players are like, wait a minute, we already agreed that we're not going to do that. And I think the Agile community is really making a huge mistake because it's a false narrative. They're saying, oh, well, we don't need governance, or, you can make any decision you want in an Agile team and it's okay. Well, no, it's not. To have a game, to have you and I work together, we have to know the clarity of the interaction model and the rules of the interaction model. Just like if you and I are going to play Settlers, we can't start using the rules of chess.
Right. Yeah, it is very important to understand or to at least know what the rules are before you opt in to play, right? Because I think once you opt in, the goal is to keep it interesting, keep it going. That's part of being in the game. So
no, and I also want to acknowledge that games do evolve, right? We start with cricket and then with baseball. We start with rugby and we end up with American football. But even those evolutions are collaboratively made decisions that are jointly agreed upon. So it's okay if a given technology is chosen by a company and they choose to make a change. When going back to Contenio, when we first started building out our software, Angular didn't exist. So we were using things like jQuery. But then Angular came along and we decided that was a better game to play. We agreed as a team, this is a better thing. Let's go here. And I want to say that there's these two concepts that are really important important. If we want to apply the lens of games and game theory in our work, then one constant is we have to know the rules. And second is if we choose to change the rules, it has to be a consensual change.
So that leads us to this work that you've been doing for some time now, is participation, having these participatory decision-making models and collaboration across different groups and team members. And when you have people designing the game together, it becomes very complex, or it becomes an awesome problem, right? And now it's harder. It's hard to solve because, we want to get to an alignment on what the rules are for the game so that everyone is okay with the rules and they want to participate, they want to play. What have you seen as ways to help people participate in making the rules?
Well, and again, that's tricky because then we start to get into this notion that everyone can participate in making the rules. And that's not true for every game, right? Mm-hmm. A game designer has a special role, and they're designing a rule-based system in a micro world, if you will, where like if I go into a video game, I can design, or a comic book, right? Imagine a comic book or a video game. Well, I can have alternative rules of physics if I feel like it, like mm-hmm. time travel. According to Stephen Hawking, can't have it. According to comic books and movies, we have it all the time.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm clearly designing a rule or a world that doesn't exist. And so that's what the storyteller, the game designer creates. So the question becomes, who is those storytellers and who are those roles? And I think that that's based on experience. I think that, again, going back into like trying to balance this conversation that we're having about games and Agile, not everyone has the experience necessary to be an architect, to be candid, right? If I've got a person who is super capable, has a 4-year degree, learned some good computer science, stuff at a 4-year college and is really well prepared for programming in the real world. They know data structures and databases, and they've probably got a reasonably modern language like maybe Python or something like that. They're wonderful contributors to a team. Do they have enough wisdom and experience to build a high-speed transaction processing system with security and scalability? I don't know. Maybe not. So I'm going to look at wisdom and experience. And frankly, we do know that some people design better games than others. They're more likely to be enjoyable to play. And so I think that recognizing these distinctions in experience and skill is really actually critical to being successful over time.
So there is some sort of a paradox, or at least who designed the game, but also having some sort of participation from the group who are going to play the game. So there is some sort of balance that needs to happen. Not everyone is going to be the architect of the game, but there is some sort of participation from the group on what the rules are and how they want to play the game.
Right.
So we wanted to spend a minute or so on the work that you're doing now with the Every Voice Engaged and First Roots. And what is your hope in terms of like getting these ideas or participatory models out there, like in,
right.
especially with schools? And
so let's knock them off in the order that you gave. So Every Voice Engaged Foundation is a nonprofit that's focused on helping citizens tackle what are called wicked problems. Mm-hmm. And wicked problems are problems basically with an uncertain future. And there are various definitions of wicked problems, but the one I find most helpful is, I know if I don't do something, it's going to get worse, but I don't know if I do something if it will get better.
Right.
Meaning I could do something and actually make it worse by doing something. And so we've got this really hard set of choices, because what you have to do in a wicked problem is you have to say, this problem is so wicked, I know it's going to get worse if I don't do something, but mm-hmm. we as a group agree that we'll try this and then we'll see how it works. And we even accept that trying it could make it worse, but we want to try something, right? So Every Voice Engaged Foundation is run by a wonderful person, Abizar Vakaria. Abizar is a highly experienced executive, and he is really focused on wicked problems. And that work is progressing, and he's doing some really interesting work. And when you look at the scope of the problems that Every Voice Engaged Foundation is tackling, Abizar and his team are tackling things ranging from bullying and opiate addiction to immigration reform, gun control, voting, electorate reform, obesity, end of life, really complex, wicked problems in various societies. What we're doing at First Root is we're focused on using participatory budgeting to teach our children financial literacy, civics, and design thinking. If you think about what we tell our kids, right? Let's think about this for a second. We walk up to our kids who are, young adults, and I want you to think of your, I'm not sure how old your kids are, but my kids are 20, 18, 16, and 15, right? So my 18-year-old and my 20-year-old are now legally able to vote, and they do, thankfully. But what about my 15 and 16-year-old? What do we tell our kids at that age? Well, we tell them, knowledge is power, but what they see in the real world is money is power. And we tell our kids, get involved, but we don't let them vote. So how are our kids going to learn to become members of the society in which they live in America when we give them such conflicting things? So what we do with participatory budgeting is we give the students in the school real money, and those kids go through choosing how to invest it. And in the process, they learn budgeting. Can we afford a proposal? They learn civics. Is this a proposal that's good for me, or is it good for other people in the school? They learn design thinking. Are we solving the problem the best way? Is it viable? Is it feasible? Is it sustainable? And I think it's one of those things where it's kind of hard to explain, but once you see it in action, it's magic.
It's again, like you gotta play the game to understand the game, right? It's not,
that's right.
You can't just learn about the game by watching it or hearing about it. It's by practicing and participating. So I know we want to stick to our planned time here, but is there anything that you would like to share or offer or point to before we?
They can always learn more about First Root at www.firstroot.co. And I'm easily accessible on social media. I tend to hang out a little bit more on LinkedIn than anywhere else. I find it a more comfortable network for me. It's professional. I would say one thing that I think is exciting. The Agile community continues to evolve and it continues to improve. And, one of the things that a lot of the Agile community is working on right now is the distinction between outputs and outcomes. Now, I can tell you, I was at the first Agile conference. No one was talking about outputs or outcomes. We were basically saying, hey, at the end of the sprint, you should have done. And then people were like, what's done? And, you should have velocity and story points. And we were so excited about just getting to there. But then over time, we've evolved and we've said, hey, look, that's maybe not enough. Now we need to understand the difference between just building a feature versus creating the right impact for our customers. We've learned through people like Don Reinerstein how to model economically things like the cost of delay and ways in which we can prioritize or sequence our work to create the best economic value for our customers and for ourselves. We learned with some of my work, how to use dates in a positive way, right? I mean, a lot of Agile people will say, I don't want to be date driven, but yet our markets are date driven, right? If I don't have the toy in the store by October, no one's going to buy it for Christmas. So we do have dates that matter, right? We do have dates that matter. And what I like about what's happening in the Agile community is it continues to evolve. It continues to embrace refinement and expansion. So we're both refining and getting clear, and we're also expanding our thinking. And that's pretty exciting. It's a great community to be a part of.
I know recently there was a 20-year anniversary on the Agile values and principles.
Did a great job of leading the Agile 20 Reflect festivals around the world, and lots of people contributed to that. And it was really wonderful to see him pull that off.
And I think that's part of the journey. The word that usually when I read the values or the manifesto, the word that I pick up is usually the better, uncovering better ways. And that's kind of like you said, like it's an emergent property that continues to get better and evolve. So hopefully that will continue to happen. And I'm glad that you're taking the work even to the first roots or kids who eventually will be participating in building or solving these awesome problems in the future. So that's very inspiring.
Well, what are the first roots of our society, right? They're our children.
Absolutely. So anything else before we go?
No, thank you so much, and I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity to talk.
Yeah, same here. Thank you very much, Luke, and thanks for your time and your insights. And hope we talk again soon.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Hey, thank you for listening. I hope this conversation gave you something to think about or take action on. Remember, take action and get clarity. Then repeat.